His thumb was over the send button. 3 words, already typed. Truck for sale. 2 in the morning. Engine off. Parked at a rest stop somewhere outside Amarillo. The kind of place where the vending machines hum too loud and the sky's so flat and dark it feels like the whole world just stopped paying attention. Mason Wells sat there in the driver's seat of his own truck. Not a company truck. His. 9 years of driving. And here he was, ready to end it with one tap. He wasn't broke. That was the strange part. He had money in the bank. A truck worth more than he owed on it. 2 other drivers running loads for him right now, somewhere out on I-40, while he sat still in the dark. None of that felt real at 2 in the morning, though. What felt real was a number. One he'd scratched onto the back of a gas station receipt about an hour before. A number that said this year, after 9 years. He'd made less than he used to make driving for somebody else. 9 years of boring. 9 years where nothing seemed to happen. And now, it looked like nothing had ever been happening at all. His finger stayed on the screen. He didn't press send. Not yet. But he wanted to. God, he wanted to. 9 years earlier, there was no truck, no number on a receipt, just a paycheck that showed up every other Friday, exactly the same as the Friday before it. Mason drove for a company out of Joplin back then. Good outfit, decent dispatcher, benefits that actually meant something. He wasn't complaining, not out loud, anyway. But he did the math one night in a motel room, and he didn't like what he found. $41,000 a year, same as last year, same as the year before that. He was 31 years old, and the number wasn't moving. Not down, not up, just sitting there, flat as the highway outside his window. He'd done everything right, showed up early, kept his logs clean, never missed a delivery window in 4 years straight. And the math still didn't work. That's the part nobody warns you about with doing everything right. Sometimes it just means you get to keep doing everything right, forever, at the same number. Carla noticed before he said a word. She always did. "You've got that look," she said one night, not even turning from the stove. "What look?" "The one where you're doing math in your head you don't like." He didn't answer that. He just kept driving the same routes, cashing the same checks, watching other guys. Guys with worse safety records, guys who couldn't tell you their own truck's oil change schedule, buy their own rigs and disappear off the company roster. Not because they were smarter, because they'd stopped waiting for the number to move on its own. The truck cost more than Mason had ever owed on anything in his life. A used Freightliner, 6 years old, 400,000 miles on it already. Sold to him by a guy retiring out of Tulsa who looked him dead in the eye and said, "This thing'll make you money or break you. Depends on you, not the truck." Mason signed the papers anyway. First year as an owner-operator. And here's the part nobody puts in the brochure. His take-home pay barely moved. Fuel. Insurance. Maintenance he never saw coming. A transmission repair in month 7 that ate almost everything he'd saved. Same paycheck. Different reasons for it being small. Carla asked him once, quiet, if it had been a mistake. "Everybody at the company thinks you lost your mind," she said. "Buying a truck older than our marriage." Maybe I did, but he didn't sell it. He kept driving, kept logging hours nobody was watching, kept doing the boring, invisible math at truck stops now instead of motel rooms, because motel rooms cost money he wasn't spending anymore. Nobody was clapping. Nobody was supposed to be. That was the thing about the middle. It didn't look like progress. It looked exactly like standing still. Except now the standing still cost more and came with a lot more risk. He told himself it'd look different in a year. It didn't look different in a year. By year 4, Mason owned 2 trucks. Not because the first one had made him rich. It hadn't. But it had survived. And surviving, it turned out, was its own kind of proof. He hired a driver named Dale for the second truck. Paid him by the mile. Kept the paperwork simple. Kept his own hands on the wheel of the first truck, because that's where the money still came from, mostly. The bank account didn't explode. It crept. $600 one month, $1,100 the next. Then a month where the transmission on Dale's truck went, and the account dropped by $4,000 in 11 days flat. Carla started keeping her own numbers, separate from his, in a small leather notebook she kept in the kitchen drawer. Not because she didn't trust him, because watching the account do almost nothing, month after month, felt better somehow if she wrote it down herself. "It's not doing anything," she told him once, flipping through pages of numbers that barely moved. "It's doing something," Mason said, "just not doing it where you can see it." He didn't fully believe that himself yet. Not then. Outside, his life looked exactly like it had 9 years back. Same house, same truck, stop coffee, same flannel jacket, same worn cuffs. Inside a locked drawer in the truck's glove box, though, there was a folder. Insurance for a third truck he hadn't told Carla about yet. Not because he was hiding it, because there was nothing to tell. Not yet. The year everything went sideways started with diesel. Prices climbed for 11 straight weeks. Not enough to make the news. Enough to make Mason's margins disappear 1 gallon at a time. Then the produce contract fell through. A regional distributor he'd hauled for since year 3, gone in a phone call that lasted 90 seconds. No warning, no explanation. Just a route that didn't belong to him anymore. Then Dale's transmission. Again. Then his other driver, a quiet guy named Ray, needed 6 weeks off for a surgery Mason didn't ask too many questions about. That's not the kind of boss he wanted to be. 6 weeks of a truck sitting still is 6 weeks of insurance and payments on a truck making nothing. Mason kept driving through all of it. Longer hauls, fewer stops. He started doing the math at truck stops instead of at home because he didn't want Carla watching his face while he did it. That gas station receipt. The one with the number scratched on the back. That was the end of 11 weeks like that. He'd written it without really meaning to, just to see it in ink instead of rattling around his head. Less than he made driving for somebody else. 9 years. And less. He sat with that number a long time before he ever touched the phone. It wasn't really about the truck. Not exactly. It was the feeling that he'd spent 9 years being patient for nothing. That boring wasn't quiet accumulation at all. That boring was just slow losing, dressed up nicer. That's the thought that had his thumb over send. Truck for sale. 3 words. 1 tap. 400 miles away, Carla was sitting at the kitchen table with a canvas bank pouch she'd found in the truck's glove box 2 weeks earlier. Back before he'd left on this run. She hadn't said anything about it yet. She'd wanted to understand it first. Inside were titles, insurance papers, a short handwritten list in Mason's own writing, one she wasn't even sure he remembered making. She'd spent 2 weeks with her own leather notebook open beside it, cross-checking numbers, adding things up the way she'd been quietly doing for years now, 1 column at a time, mostly for her own peace of mind. That night, she finished the math. She called him at 2:04 a.m. The phone rang in his hand, right as his thumb sat over the button. He almost didn't answer. "You're not selling that truck," she said, before he'd even gotten out a hello. "Carla!" "I found the pouch. I've been going through it for 2 weeks." A pause. "Mason, do you know what you actually have?" He didn't. Not all of it. Not added up in one place. "You've got 4 trucks," she said. "Not 2. 4. You've got a lot behind the route, 9 truck stop you bought 2 years ago that you never told me you were leasing out to other drivers for parking. You've got titles paid off free and clear on 2 of these trucks completely." He sat there in the dark, engine off, phone against his ear. "That's not nothing," Carla said, quieter now. "That was never nothing." Here's what 9 boring years had actually built, whether Mason had been keeping track of it or not. 4 trucks, 2 paid off outright, 2 still carrying notes but worth more than what was owed, 3 drivers on the road, counting Mason himself when he chose to be one of them. The lot behind the Route 9 truck stop, 5 acres of gravel and chain link he'd bought in year 6 for almost nothing because nobody wanted to store trailers on unpaved ground. Now it brought in $2,200 a month, steady, from independent haulers who needed somewhere to park that wasn't a truck stop charging by the night. Added up. Trucks, the lot, savings, equity, and Mason Wells was sitting on close to $1,800,000, not on paper somewhere far away, not tied up in something complicated. 4 trucks and a gravel lot that a man from Tulsa once said would make him money or break him. Depends on him, not the truck. It had never been about that first truck being a mistake. That was the year everybody figured he'd lost his mind, buying something older than his marriage. But it was never the mistake. It was the beginning of the only thing that was actually working. The bank account hadn't moved much most months because the money wasn't staying in the bank account. It was going into equity, into the lot, into a second truck, then a third, then a fourth. Nobody claps for that. Nobody's supposed to. Mason deleted the message, didn't even finish typing it, just backed out of the text thread and set the phone face down on the dash. He sat there another minute, not because he needed to, because some moments deserve a minute before you drive away from them. Then he started the engine. The bad year didn't disappear. The lost contract stayed lost. Diesel stayed high for a few more months before it finally came back down. But the fear that had driven him to that message, the fear that 9 years had built nothing, that part was gone. It had never been true. It had just been loud. Loud at 2 in the morning, at a rest stop outside Amarillo, the way fear gets loud when you're alone and tired and staring at the wrong number. He drove home 3 days later. Carla had the pouch out on the kitchen table, next to her leather notebook, both of them full of a version of his life he hadn't fully seen until somebody else added it up for him. He didn't sell the truck. He never sold any of them. Some years just look like nothing is happening. That's usually the year it's happening the most.